Welcome everyone to the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund Phase 2. This is the Spring Window briefing event, and my name is Jenny McDonald from Innovate UK, KTN. We're helping the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy by hosting today's event on their behalf, and I'm ably assisted by my colleagues Ray Chegwin and Olivia Brown. So before we get started with today's presentations, I just want to run through a few housekeeping points just to make sure that you get the most out of today's event. So first of all, you're all watching this through YouTube, so you won't be able to actually ask us a question, but we do want you to be able to ask questions. So if you have a question as you're watching the presentations this morning, please type those into the chat box on YouTube. My colleague Ray Chegwin is in YouTube land with you, so he will copy those questions across to us so that we can answer those questions for you at the Q&A. I would say though, don't leave your question until the Q&A. Don't start typing when we get to the Q&A, otherwise Ray is going to be inundated. So as soon as you think of a question, as you're watching the presentations, type it in, and then we'll try and cover as many as we can at the Q&A session. It would also be useful if you could say which competition the question relates to, if it does relate to a competition, so either the studies, the energy efficiency deployment or the decarbonisation deployment, and that will help us to give you the right answer. This is obviously a great opportunity to do a bit of virtual networking as well. We have over 850 people registered for today's event, all interested in the Ietf fund. So please do introduce yourselves on YouTube, pop your name and organisation, maybe a sentence or two about why you're interested in the Ietf, because you never know, your partner might be out there with you listening through YouTube. Today's event is going to be recorded and you will be sent a link to the recording after the event. So you'll be able to watch it again and share maybe with colleagues who haven't been able to attend today. There's also, after today's briefing event this afternoon, an opportunity to have a one-to-one confidential discussion with Bays or myself, maybe about your project idea or help to find partners. If you would like to have one of those 10-minute meetings, you book those through the dedicated Ietf networking platform Meeting Mojo. So you were sent a link to that before today's event from Olivia. Olivia Brown. I will put it up there on the screen again for you, and Ray will put it into the chat box. So if you haven't already registered, if you're not already a member of that networking platform, and you want to have a one-to-one with Bays, then please do register. It's very, very quick to do. And you can pick one of the times to come and have a chat with us. So let's have a look at today's agenda. Well, following the welcome, which is any minute now, we'll be having presentations from Bays. First of all, we will hear about the net zero policy that is driving this funding to help you get to net zero. We'll then hear about the competitions themselves. So the three competitions will cover the scope, the eligibility, how to apply, and then you'll get an opportunity to have your questions answered. So as I say, don't wait till that time, don't wait till the Q&A to start typing, put those questions in as soon as you think of them. We'll get through as many as we can. If there are lots of questions and we don't quite finish them all, then we will try and follow up with you after today's event. We'll then have an opportunity to have a coffee break. And during that coffee break, we'd like you to do a very short Mentimeter survey. There's only 5 questions, and I'll explain exactly how to do that when we get to the break. You can do it on your phone or your computer. After the break, we have 2 presentations from projects that were funded in phase 1, so summer 2020. We're going to hear from Saint-Gobain Glass and also Sofidel. They'll be talking through their experience of the Ietf fund and what it is, more importantly, what it's helping them to do. And hopefully that will give you some ideas of what you can do at your industrial site as well. It'll then be the audience, you guys who've opted to do a 2-minute pitch. It'll be your chance to give a 2-minute pitch about your technology that's eligible for the Ietf. And that again is just a way to raise your profile and hopefully help you to find a partner to work with on the Ietf funding. And then finally, I'll do a short presentation on the support that's available to you when you're applying into the Ietf. And we'll finish then at around 12:30. Then after lunch break, we will move on to the networking platform, Meeting Mojo, for those one-to-one meetings if you've booked one. So hopefully that is going to be really useful to you with all the information that we're providing, and hopefully enjoyable too. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Olivia Absalom, who's the Deputy Director for the Ietf programme. And Olivia is going to set the scene and talk about the net zero policy. So over to you, Olivia.
Hi, Jenny. Thank you very much for that introduction. I should just, as a point of housekeeping, say my feed does cut out occasionally, but hopefully we will survive this first 10-minute presentation. So hi to everyone there in YouTube land, and thanks very much for so many of you for signing up to this session. We're delighted that there's so much interest. So as Jenny said, I'm just going to give a bit of background to where this fund sits in our policy landscape. So if we can move to the first slide. So in 2019, the UK government set a legally binding target to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions from across the UK economy by 2050. And we were the first major economy to commit to ending our contribution to climate change. Now, industrial emissions account for around 16% of total UK emissions, of which a significant amount is from the manufacturing sector. So to reach net zero in 2050, industrial emissions will need to fall by as much as 90% relative to today's level. Now, a pathway for decarbonising industry is presented in our Industrial Decarbonisation Strategy, which was published last year, and more recently in our Net Zero Strategy. Both documents recognise the strategic importance of the industrial sectors, which contribute around 170 billion to the UK economy and support around 2.6 million jobs. Government is very mindful of setting a policy direction that will support industry to remain competitive, particularly in light of recent fuel price rises. And it's government's intention that through supporting you to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050, there'll be new opportunities to level up the economy across all regions of the country. Enabling investment in decarbonised technologies can drive job creation and new inward investment in the UK and create new markets for our manufacturers. So if we just move on to the next slide, so government action on industrial decarbonisation. So to accelerate the transformation towards net zero, there's several actions that BEIS is undertaking. So we're investigating the pathway industry could take to reach net zero. We're exploring the creation of a market for low carbon industrial products and assessing the skills required to achieve net zero. We're doing this by working collaboratively with industry to build policies for change. For instance, we published our hydrogen strategy in August, along with 3 consultations on the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund, hydrogen business models, and the UK low carbon hydrogen standard. We also consult regularly on many aspects of policy development to improve proposals before they're implemented. We know we won't get it right without your input. We also published our net zero strategy in October of 2021. If you haven't seen that, I do recommend giving it a read. We're also investing in change. We launched phase 1 of this fund, which we'll be getting into more detail today, in 2020, and phase 2 launched in late 2021. This phase 2, the second window of that launched yesterday, and as I said, we're delighted that there's so much interest in today's event. But the Ietf is just one part of a multi-billion-pound investment programme to achieve industrial decarbonisation, which also includes the Transforming Foundation Industries programme, worth £66 million, the Carbon Capture and Storage Infrastructure Fund, the Low Carbon Hydrogen Production Fund, and also the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio. Alongside this investment, BEIS leads the design and delivery of a wider policy framework in support of industrial decarbonisation. And we are developing a long-term policy framework which will support industry decarbonise and remain internationally competitive. And finally, just a mention on industrial clusters mission. So we're prioritising action to decarbonise strategically important clusters. So over half of industrial emissions are concentrated in just 6 clusters. So to accelerate the transformation to net zero, we're investing £170 million of industrial strategy challenge funding to support the deployment of low carbon technologies and enabling infrastructure and the development of cluster decarbonisation roadmaps. Okay, so now let's move on to a bit more about the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund. So this fund was set up to support businesses with high energy use to cut their bills and reduce carbon emissions. The Ietf will provide funding for investment in energy efficiency and deep decarbonisation projects, and this investment will be guided by our objectives to reduce energy costs and emissions for industry and to bring down costs and the risks of deep decarbonisation technologies by demonstrating those technologies. Support will be targeted at industrial processes, recognising that this can be one of the most hard to abate areas of an industrial site's activity. But the Ietf does not support operating costs, fuel production or renewable energy proposals which are supported through other funds. Specifically, grant funding through this fund will be available towards the costs of deploying energy efficiency and decarbonisation technologies and the costs of feasibility and engineering studies to help your company make an investment decision about deploying these technologies. We welcome applications from businesses of any size, provided you meet our further eligibility criteria, which will be covered in a later presentation by my colleagues. So who's who on the Ietf? If we move on to slide 5. So the UK government announced 315 million of funding in the 2018 autumn budget. This funding is available until 2025. So our department, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, manages the Ietf with £289 million to invest in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. In phase 1, we worked with Innovate UK to successfully deliver the first 2 competition windows. And BEIS is delivering phase 2, the part of the fund that we're in now. So please do direct any future inquiries to us rather than our Innovate UK colleagues. KTN will continue to run our events and provide access to great resources like the virtual technology marketplace. And just to note that the Scottish Government will administer a £34 million fund for investment in Scotland via its own Scottish Ietf. Details about further windows of that fund will be published in due course. So in terms of our Ietf, and this is to look at the funding and competition windows, which I know we'll get into a bit more detail later. But as I said earlier, we've delivered the Ietf in 2 phases. The 2 windows that took place in phase 1 allocated up to £70 million to industry for energy efficiency deployment projects and studies. Details about the phase 1 outcomes and winners are published online, and I'm delighted that we have some of them with us on the call today to talk about their projects. More case studies will be shared as projects complete due diligence processes, and they'll be shared on the government website. Phase 2 was launched in autumn last year and will allocate up to £220 million in funding across 4 windows. So we've split the funding into phases so that we can respond to stakeholder feedback on the design of the fund and also give time for pipeline of decarbonisation projects to develop. The consecutive nature of the windows will hopefully give you a few opportunities to develop your applications, but we do encourage you to submit these as early as possible to stand the best chance of receiving funding and applicant support. So the autumn window was worth up to 60 million in funding and runs from yesterday until the 29th of April. If we just take a moment to reflect a bit more on phase 1 of the fund, this next slide just gives a bit of a summary of some of the competition winners from 2020. And this is the competition that ran from July to October 2020. So 39 applications were approved for funding with a value of around £31 million. We're delighted to see applications and winning projects from a range of regions, sectors, technologies and size of companies. So some successful bids announced on 24th of May included Selsa Manufacturing in Cardiff, Wales, who will receive £3 million to install new technologies to reduce emissions and improve energy efficiencies in the process to melt scrap metal and produce steel. This project could increase domestic scrap processing and production of steel in the UK, reducing the need to import materials from around the world and lowering the country's carbon footprint. We also have one of our speakers who will be giving a bit more detail on their example in this session today, Saint-Gobain Glass from North Yorkshire. They'll receive over £1.4 million to deliver a new flat glass production furnace to improve the efficiency of its UK plant whilst reducing energy consumption, emissions and ongoing maintenance costs. As another example, Tate & Lyle in London will receive over £500,000 to study how it can decarbonise its sugar refinery and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 90%. The aim of this project is to explore new technology that reduces emissions and can remove carbon from the air that could be deployed at Tate & Lyle's refinery and also at other sugar refineries around the world. And then finally, the last example I'll give is Phillips 66 Limited in Humberside, which will receive over £500,000 to explore switching fuel in its gas refineries, industrial-fired heaters with renewable and low-carbon hydrogen. Doing so will help to decarbonise these heaters and significantly reduce emissions while demonstrating hydrogen for industrial uses. So that's just a taster. We'll have more examples for that of successful applications in this session later today. Okay, so in terms of eligible Ietf technology solutions, we've taken a technology neutral approach to the fund. Our guidance, which is published online, sets out some specific eligibility requirements, and we encourage you to read this before starting your application. But for instance, grants will be offered to install or retrofit process equipment on existing sites or to conduct a study on those sites. The fund has a broad remit in terms of sectors and technologies, so do please refer to the online guidance for more details, and my colleagues Lily and Bess will later on be setting out some more of those details too. But for specific questions about eligibility for any proposals, I do encourage you to use the BEIS's eligibility screening service or attend one of our stakeholder clinics. Our eligibility rules are guided by the following 4 principles. So projects should demonstrate that they will reduce energy use and/or carbon emissions from existing industrial processes. Projects need to align with our net zero goal for 2050. And remember, this is a transformation fund, so we won't support projects where there is already government support or where equipment is well established and affordable. And we are not an R&D fund, and technologies will need to have reached a certain level of maturity to be eligible. But I do encourage you, if you have any questions on that, to use our eligibility screening service. Okay, so just on deep decarbonisation technology solutions. So phase 2 opened the fund to decarbonisation deployment technologies for the first time. So this means that alongside energy efficiency projects that reduce the energy consumption of processes, we can also support direct emissions reductions from solutions such as electrification, fuel switching to hydrogen and other low carbon fuels, and carbon capture. The Ietf will complement a package of industrial decarbonisation policies, including the £240 million net zero hydrogen fund and the £1 billion carbon capture and storage infrastructure fund, and support available through the cluster sequencing process. Again, there's quite a few funds that we're mentioning there. If at all unsure, please do contact us and we can give advice on what fund may be most applicable to you. So in terms of the broader net zero innovation portfolio, if you're in an early stage of your decarbonisation pathway or have a less mature technology that you want considered for funding support, the net zero innovation portfolio might be the one for you. It supports companies to develop and test technologies which are at an earlier stage of development than the Ietf can support. So keep an eye out on the NZIP webpage for updates on new funding opportunities. This includes competitions such as the Industry of the Future programme, which helps firms to develop site-level decarbonisation roadmaps, and the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator, which can support the development of new efficient technologies. And then I just want to reference what we currently have out is a hydrogen call for evidence. So whilst we have your attention, it's good to flag this. This is a call for evidence out which is on enabling or requiring hydrogen-ready industrial boiler equipment. This call for evidence, which closes on the 14th of March, is seeking to understand questions such as how should hydrogen-ready be defined for industrial boilers, and what is the role of the supply chain? So the hydrogen team will be holding webinars to support this evidence gathering. One is this afternoon, and there's also one on the 2nd of February, so this Thursday. If you wish to attend, please contact the team at the email address on the screen. Okay, so back to the Ietf, which is what we're here to focus on today. So in terms of preparing your application, we're here to support you and want to make sure that the high quality proposals are successful in the application process. So if you have any doubts or questions about your eligibility, please do get in touch and we can work with you to understand whether the proposal fits the scope of the competition and put you on the right track. We do advise getting in touch with applicant support services as early as you can, as they generally get busy towards the end of the window. If you're anything like me, you definitely work to deadlines, but please, I encourage you to start early and get that help and support you need. I think that's it from me. So thanks very much for listening to that.
Thanks very much, Olivia. That was great. So again, if you have any questions for Olivia about anything she's just spoken about, then please do pop those in the chat box on YouTube and we'll try and cover those at the Q&A session. So next, we're going to hear about the competitions themselves. And we have Lily Tozer, who is head of Ietf capacity building, and also Beth Hume, who's the Ietf senior policy advisor, who are going to take you through the competition scope, eligibility, and also how to apply. So over to you, Lily.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everyone, and thank you very much, as everyone said, for joining this morning. It really is great to hear that there's some interest in the fund, and ultimately we are here to support you in your application process. So today, Bess and I are going to talk you through the scope, who's eligible to apply, how the process itself works, and what level of support you're eligible to apply for. The competition that's open at the moment runs until the 29th of April. So you've got all the way until 3 p.m. on the 29th to submit your applications. As Olivia said, please do have a think about getting your proposals developed as early as possible. If you do that, we can have a chat with you, talk you through the process, answer any of your questions, and you won't be rushing right at the end. But hopefully there's ample time here for you to get ideas together, bring your project team together and develop your proposal. Once we've received your application, we'll go through an assessment stage. So this will be checking that your proposal is eligible, and there will be a panel of independent assessors who will review the information that you've given us, provide some scores, and those will go forward to a panel where we'll decide which applications ultimately will be successful for the fund. You'll be told about the outcome of your application around September, October of this year. We'll aim to do everything as quickly as possible so that you have that confidence of whether you've secured funding. And once you have got that notification, we'll work with you to do a process of project setup and due diligence to ensure that the funding is going to the right place and the right project. Then you can get going with your project or your study. We just ask that all projects begin by the 1st of May 2023. If you're doing a feasibility study, they're typically shortest timelines, so you'll need to complete by 1st of May 2024. And if you are doing a larger scale deployment project or a feed or engineering study, then you'll need to complete by the 31st of March 2025. And that's ultimately the deadline when all of our funding will need to be spent. So that's why we've instilled this timeline, and we'll work with you to make sure that it's deliverable. Hopefully this funding round works in terms of your timelines if you've got an idea, but if it doesn't, that's not a problem at all. We'll be running 2 further competition windows, as Olivia mentioned, so hopefully you can start developing your ideas now and perhaps apply in one of those later windows. We've got 3 strands of the current competition, so it all falls under the Ietf umbrella. But it depends what type of proposal you have in mind. So if you're looking to deploy an energy efficiency technology and you need funding support towards the capital costs of doing that, then you can apply for our energy efficiency deployment strand. The same theme, if you are ready to go with a deep decarbonisation project, then you can apply through our deployment strand for deep decarbonisation. And if you're at an earlier stage and you are not quite ready to make an investment decision because you need to do some further investigation about the proposal, then you can apply through our studies strand. That's open to both energy efficiency and decarbonisation solutions, and you can apply for funding towards a feasibility or an engineering study. I'll talk about all of the scope of these competitions in a little bit more detail, but first I want to talk you through the eligibility rules that apply across the whole competition. So chiefly, this is about who is eligible to apply. So the key here is that As Olivia mentioned, our fund is primarily targeted at sites within England, Wales and Northern Ireland. So if you have a site in Scotland, you can apply through the Scottish Ietf, and much of the content of this presentation will be similar in terms of the scope of that competition. You must also be registered in England, Wales and Northern Ireland to apply. We want ultimately to support industrial sectors and industrial processes, recognising that those are processes that are perhaps not covered by other schemes and are very difficult to abate. So we recognise that that extra government support is needed to get these projects over the line. And the way that we define industry is captured in this table here. So we use standard industrial classification codes, which are codes that you can look up online, and they show a big long list of all the different types of processes that fall under these categories. Broadly, that's mining and quarrying. So this is a sector that we've introduced into the scheme as of the last round. Manufacturing sectors, recovery and recycling of materials. So this is all to do with sorting perhaps of metals, recovery of metals, for example, as well as some other materials. And data centers too, so recognising that they're very heavy energy intensive industries. If you're not quite sure whether your company fits within this scope, the first thing to do would be, if you're registered on Companies House, to have a look at your company profile. Typically, you'll have registered under a SIP code, so you can check whether that falls within this scope. However, we recognise that often that may be out of date, or you might fall under an umbrella company that does lots of activities and it doesn't necessarily reflect the activity that you're doing at your site. That's not a problem at all. The key thing is we want to make sure our money is going to the right sites. So if you can evidence in your application that you're carrying out a process that fits within the scope of this table, then you'll be eligible, and we'll just ask you to provide a little bit of evidence to support that statement. We also really do support collaboration. So we recognise that installation of these technologies, carrying out studies, often requires a lot of collaboration between different organisation types. So the key thing is that if you are applying, the focus of the study or the project must be an industrial site, and it's the industrial site itself that will need to lead the study. So they will be the named lead applicant on our application, and they'll be the organisation which BEIS has our chief relationship with. So we'll sign a grant funding agreement with you as the industrial site. But you can collaborate with others, and normally we would expect you to put in place a collaboration agreement to make sure that collaboration goes smoothly and we understand who's working and incurring what kind of costs as part of the project. And you can be a business, a research organisation, an academic institution, a charity or a public sector body, and collaborate alongside that industrial partner. Again, there are some restrictions, so you must be based in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And all of the work you're doing ultimately must be related to the project. I know that goes without saying, but the key thing is here that we're ultimately looking for the end beneficiary to be the industrial site. There's quite a lot of rules around the level of support that you can receive as a project partner. The one I'll pick out today is that there is a maximum level on the amount of funding you can receive as a research organisation. So any costs incurred by research organisations must not exceed 30% of the total costs for your proposal. And there are a few other factors that impact on how much support you can receive. So one of these is the size of your company. I know this has been raised in the YouTube questions already as to what level of support is available to what size of company. So I just stress that the ITF is open to everyone. There's no minimum or maximum threshold on the size of your company. And if you're sort of not familiar with schemes, perhaps you're a smaller company that hasn't done it before, we can help you through the process and provide as much sort of support as we can to get your application through. The thresholds that are set here determine how you can categorise your company. So you'll need to look at your staff headcount and then either the turnover or balance sheet total that your company has achieved over the past few years to understand which of these categories you fall into. Obviously, if you're exceeding any of these categories on the table, then you would be classed as a large company. There are also some uplifts available depending on where you're located. So there's a map provided in our guidance that shows areas that are more deprived economically. If your site is situated in those areas, then you'll be able to apply for an uplift in the deployment competitions. And I'll move on now to talk about each of the strands in a little bit more detail. So I mentioned the studies strand. And in terms of the scope of support there, essentially we can provide grant funding against the eligible costs for studies, which we define here chiefly as the people costs. So it's all about the costs that you incur in carrying out the study, either working with your own staff or working with consultants and ESCOs. In some cases, you might also need to purchase or use equipment. Those costs can be included within the scope of your study as well, but we'll normally look to test the period over which we're using that equipment. So here we're not looking to, for example, help you to invest in the development of prototypes or new on-site equipment that will be used in the long term. It's all about the costs that you'd incurred purely for carrying out the study. And the ambition of that study ultimately should be to help you towards an investment decision in whether you want to invest in that project on a long-term basis. These studies aren't about general research and development or options analysis, which could be around testing different types of technology solutions. Ultimately, we want you to be considering in detail whether a specified technology is relevant for your site. As Olivia mentioned, there are schemes that are open for kind of earlier stage studies where you might be looking to do more of an R&D type investigation. Feasibility studies are generally something that you would carry out when you're at a fairly early stage. You've identified what technology you want to do, but now you want to find out whether it can be feasibly integrated into your industrial process and perhaps what the costs and risks associated with that would be. Recognise there's a large scale of costs that can be associated with these studies. So we have put a minimum and maximum here, which is your study must be a minimum of £30,000 in total costs. And we can provide you with grant support all the way up to a grant of £7 million. And the aid intensity that we can provide, so that's the proportion of the costs that we can cover in a grant, ranges between 50% and 70%, depending on the size of your company. But we do really stress that to improve the value for money of your proposition, make sure that government's spending its money in the best possible way, that you think about how much funding you actually require from a third-party source in order to get this project over the line and to minimise that grant funding that you're asking for. A single study can include within its scope the investigation required to deploy that technology at a range of sites. So we recognise sometimes larger companies might have multiple sites, all at which you want to employ the same type of technology. If that's the case and that all would fit within the scope of one study, then you can do that under the competition scope for the studies strand. If you're a little bit more advanced in your thinking, so you think that the technology is feasible to be deployed at your site, and now you want to go further and investigate some of the permitting and consenting that might be required, perhaps do investigation health and safety aspects, get a better sense of the exact benefits that could be achieved through the study and the specific costs, then you can carry out an engineering study. These generally are a bit more expensive than feasibility studies, so the minimum cost there must be at least £50,000, but we can provide you with grant support all the way up to £14 million in support. And the aid intensities again are repeated here and range for smaller and larger companies slightly differently. If you have got even further along your journey with what project you'd like to carry out and you're ready to actually make an investment decision and get shovels in the ground and install that technology, then you can apply for the deployment strands to the competition. And here the Ietf can provide support towards the upfront costs of that deployment. So ongoing operating costs that you might incur as a result of the technology are not in scope, but we can hopefully help bring down that payback or reduce the risks around making that initial upfront investment in the capital. The scope of support can cover both the cost of the equipment you're deploying, wider material costs, costs of subcontractors, labour costs, etc. And really, we will test that the costs are eligible for the scheme. So this means that you will need to provide a justification as to why you wouldn't have incurred those costs normally. So we don't, for example, want to be supporting you with regular maintenance or costs that you'd incur just from getting your equipment up to minimum legal standards. But if you can show you're going above and beyond, for example, you are investing in the very best available equipment rather than a like-for-like replacement of your equipment, then if you can identify the component of those costs that you've incurred from doing that additional investment in energy efficiency or additional investment in decarbonisation outcomes, then we can provide you with support towards that. If you have any questions about whether different costs for your proposal are eligible, please do get in touch with us. We can talk you through and work out what those eligible costs would be for your project. The amount of support that you can receive differs between the energy efficiency and the deployment competition. This is really because we recognise that deep decarbonisation comes with often additional risks, additional operating costs. Technologies might not be quite as well understood by other private finances and so on. So we try and give you a little bit more incentive to deploy those technologies by providing a higher rate of grant support. But to start off with, in energy efficiency, the minimum grant that you can receive is £100,000. So that means you must ensure that the scale of your project overall is enough to get you over that £100,000 threshold. And we can provide you with up to £14 million. So some really large projects could also be within scope of this competition. And the eligible grant range is there from 30% to 50% of the costs. The so the key thing about energy efficiency deployment is you must show that you're able to reduce the energy consumed by the industrial process at site level. And once you've finished the installation of that project, it must be operational. For deep decarbonisation, again, the minimum grant available is £100,000. It ranges all the way up to £30 million. And at the end of the project, again, you must have begun to operate the decarbonisation technology. It might be the case that you've got more than one proposal in mind, either within the boundary of an existing site, or perhaps you've got multiple different sites where you want to deploy different technologies. In that case, you can either apply for different applications, or you can apply with an aggregated project. There are a few rules about when aggregation is permitted. Largely, this is to make sure that we're assessing your project fairly, so we're using the right criteria to understand your project. And so that means that we unfortunately can't allow you to mix energy efficiency and deep decarbonisation technologies within the scope of one competition application. You also can't mix studies and deployment projects or feasibility and engineering studies together. But if, for example, you had 3 different energy efficiency technology solutions that you wanted to deploy at a site, then you could aggregate those up. And there can be benefits to that if, for example, individually all of those projects are below our minimum thresholds, you can aggregate them up to achieve the threshold that we require. I'll very quickly run through the technological scope of each of the competitions, but I really encourage you to read our guidance in more detail. In terms of the technology readiness level, I've mentioned that the fund isn't targeted at research and development. Really, we're trying to make sure that we can deploy more mature technologies in sites so that they're ready to go and start achieving those emissions and energy savings. So if you're applying with a deep decarbonisation technology, either through the study or deployment competition, we'll ask that you evidence that it's at technology readiness level 7. So that means it's already been prototyped or demonstrated in an operational environment. And in energy efficiency strands, the TRL must be at least 8, so it must have been qualified through test and demonstration. Again, if you have questions around that, please come and get in touch with us. When we talk about energy efficiency technologies, we're talking about anything that can deliver energy savings within this boundary of your site in terms of the industrial processes you're carrying out. So that could include installing process control systems, upgrading your equipment to more efficient models, heat recovery and energy recovery, including heat pump technologies, and also resource efficiency measures where they will directly lead to a reduction in the energy that you are using on your process. For deep decarbonisation technologies, the key here is that you must be able to demonstrate that you will achieve a direct emission saving on your process. So this isn't about saving energy. So pre and post your investment, it's not the case that we're interested in, for example, you're using less gas overall, which will of course have an emission saving. What we're interested here is that you're showing that you've moved to, for example, a lower carbon fuel. So you've switched away from gas to electricity, or perhaps you're installing equipment that's going to directly capture some of the emissions that you're producing on your site. That can be both CO2 emissions or any other greenhouse gas emissions that might be in scope, which I know is another question that's been raised. The scope of fuel switches is covered in more detail in the guidance, but the key here is that really we want to make sure we're not locking in technologies that won't be compatible with net zero longer term. So the minimum sort of threshold for what an acceptable fuel switch is the gas grid. So we would expect any fuel switch that you make to be toward a lower carbon fuel than you're currently using, and to a fuel that ultimately is no more carbon intensive than the gas grid. I'll just mention a couple of those fuel switches in a bit more detail because there are some specific rules around them. So generally, government position is that we do support biomass, but we want to be reassured that it's being used in the best cases for industry. So this is quite often in high heat applications. So you'll be asked to evidence that the need for the biomass is for a temperature that's over 240 degrees. And you must, of course, evidence that you're using a sustainable source of biomass that won't result in adverse environmental impacts. If you're switching to hydrogen, again, we recognise this relatively novel technology. So there are a few things that we've done to help encourage you where perhaps you haven't necessarily secured the hydrogen supply as of yet. What we'll ask you to do is show that you've got a plan for where you're going to get that hydrogen, that perhaps you've entered into initial negotiations or you have a contract underway with a hydrogen supplier, and that you can guarantee that you will switch to using that hydrogen within at least 5 years of deploying the technology. On carbon capture technologies, again, we kind of apply the same kind of principles. So you must show that you can either capture that carbon and use it within your own processes or for sale, but we would want to be reassured there that you have a definite end use for that carbon, so it's not being captured and then wasted. Or if you're looking to store it, then you must again have a proposal as to how you're going to do that, who you're going to work with, and all of those will be tested by our assessors. Very quickly to mention a few things that are out of scope and commonly come up as questions. We're looking ultimately to support reductions in emissions and energy on existing sites and existing processes. So if you're looking to set up a new process, develop a new technology, or expand your operations, the scope of the Ietf support cannot be used towards those costs. If you're looking to do anything again that would just be around repair and maintenance of your typical equipment, that wouldn't be in scope, nor would anything to do with your general buildings. So heating, lighting, space heating are all out of scope for this competition, which focuses on industrial processes. The production of fuels or renewable electricity generation are also out of scope. And we do support CHP, but only where there is a fuel switch. So that means that you'd need to be deploying under the deep decarbonisation strand of the competition. I'll now pass you across to my colleague Bess, who's going to talk a bit more about how the actual process of the competition works.
Hello everybody, I'm Bess Hume. I'm one of the policy and delivery advisors working on the Ietf. Thank you, Lily, for passing over there. The next few slides, I'm going to concentrate particularly on the process by which applications will be assessed and then decisions taken on funding. So I guess just to start with some overall points on the assessment process. So this is a competitive process, but it's important to note that each competition strand, so studies, energy efficiency deployment, and deep decarbonisation deployment, will be ranked individually. They won't be competing with one another. Decisions once the assessment process has taken place, so decisions around the recommendations for ministers will be made by a BEIS grant award panel. And it's perhaps important to pull out that the key criteria, although there are different criteria for each of the different competition strands, the key criteria across all of them are around value for money and additionality. So would this project have happened without government funding? And it's really important that you sort of think about bringing that out in your applications. And although it might sound simplistic, it is also really important that when applying, you try and answer the question and provide as much high quality justification and evidence to suit the criteria. And we really do want to support as many projects as we can. And in the past, certainly we found there have been occasions where, you know, perhaps more information could have been provided, and it would be a shame for applications to sort of fail on that point, if you like. So those are some general points on the assessment process. I'm now going to go through the different competition strands to give you a feeling for the criteria that we will be looking to award upon. So first of all, starting with the studies competition strand, as you can see on the slide, there are 6 criteria. These are weighted, and applications will need to pass a minimum quality thresholds in order to be successful. And as I said, they will then be ranked by score and considered by the BEIS grant award panel. As part of the application, applicants for the studies competition strand will need to provide a project plan and a risk register as part of the application. Moving on to the assessment process for the deployment competition strand, so energy efficiency and deep decarbonisation. So once again, they won't be assessed against each other, but there are similarities in the assessment process. So for both energy efficiency deployment and deep decarbonisation deployment, there are 3 key criteria. First of all, the economic assessment of the project. So this is going to determine if your project represents good value for money. We'll be looking at the costs, the benefits, the risks that the benefits aren't achieved, and also, as I mentioned before, whether your project would have gone ahead without government support, what we call additionality or added value. And as part of the economic assessment, you'll be asked to fill out and upload a project benefits calculator, which I'll come on to a little bit later. The second criteria is around transformational assessment. So this is to determine whether or not your project is compatible with the government's net zero commitment. So some of the things that Olivia was alluding to earlier in the presentation. In particular, you'll be asked to justify your technology choices, to demonstrate the replicability and scalability of your project. And for deep decarbonisation projects, we'll also be looking to understand the novelty of that project. And finally, the third criterion is the deliverability assessment. So here you'll be asked to explain how you will successfully deliver the project. You'll need to understand your project plan, the team that you will be working with, and how that team and the plan will be managed, as well as the risks and how you will be looking to mitigate that as part of your project. I'm now going to move on to perhaps the most important information, which is how to apply. Hopefully some of you will have already had a chance to look at these pages. All the application details and guidance can be found at the link in the slide. The lead applicant will need to create an account and set up the application. And as the lead applicant, you can then invite others to come and collaborate on an application. As Lily mentioned, we encourage collaboration where appropriate. Only the lead applicant can submit the proposal, and you can save your work at any stage and log back in to continue the application. So the only other thing I would say is, if you do experience any technical hitches when trying to use the application form, please do get in touch. We don't want people to be put off by that, and we'd encourage you to get in touch as soon as you can. Moving on then, once you've completed your application, to submitting your application. So as I believe both Olivia and Lily have already said, the key date here is the 29th of April, which feels like a long way away, but probably isn't when we think of all the work that needs to go into these applications. So that's the date by which the application must be submitted online. You will need to ensure that some application documents are submitted alongside the application. So you'll need to have completed a finance form, which I'll come on to shortly. As I've mentioned already, the project benefits calculator for deployment projects. You'll also need to, and this is a slight difference for anybody who was looking at the application form last time around, a slight difference in this round is that you must upload evidence to support your responses to some of the economic assessment questions, and that is now mandatory, whereas previously it was optional. And again, that's for deployment only. A completed Gantt chart or project plan, a completed risk register, and for some of the questions, there will also be the option to provide additional supporting information. So please do provide that where you feel that it's useful to your application. Moving on to a couple of the attachments, just to give you an idea of what they look like and what you'll be expected to provide in terms of information. So as I mentioned, all proposals will need to fill in a finance form. If you're applying with a number of projects in an aggregated application, there are separate tabs for each of those projects. The finance form requires information about the lead applicant and project partner costs, your eligible costs, the amount of grant you're requesting, and other sources of funding. And again, I'd sort of stress, please make sure that these numbers sort of add up and are the same as the numbers that you have put elsewhere in the application form. You may be asked, for instance, on a couple of occasions for the grant amount requested. So the more that you can just make sure the numbers line up, the better, really. It's your responsibility to ensure the details are correct and in line with all the subsidy control rules and regulations. And perhaps most importantly, or one of a very important point here, is that we expect applicants to present the minimum funding necessary for the project to go ahead. Moving on then to the project benefits calculator. So this is only relevant if you're applying for a deployment project. You'll need to complete and upload the project benefits calculator, which in fact it says here is downloaded on the Ietf landing page. You'll actually find it within the application form. You'll be asked to provide information on things like your annual energy consumption, production levels, greenhouse gas emissions before and after completion of the project. And you'll also need to, as part of the application, outline the calculations and assumptions and sources underpinning your calculator. And slightly different from the finance form, if you're applying for multiple projects as part of an aggregated application, for example, you will need to complete a separate calculator for each individual project, because in order to ensure that we have the full information available there to be able to judge your application to the best of our ability. So then moving on to after submission, Lily's already touched on some of this. I'll just give you a little bit more detail. So the first step is for us to conduct eligibility checks. This is to ensure your proposal meets the relevant eligibility criteria as set out in the guidance and this presentation. And we may at that point contact applicants for minor clarifications if things are unclear. We then move into the initial assessment and award process. So each application will be marked by 3 assessors. And as I said, the applications for the same competition strand will be assessed against the same scoring criteria. The scores are then moderated and the projects are ranked and considered by our award panel before recommendations are made to ministers. Successful projects will then be required to pass all due diligence checks and accept the terms and conditions of BEIS's grant funding agreement before the final award can be made. So please, I believe it says it in the application form as well, please do ensure that you've got the resource to put into that process as well, because it can take some time just to do the due diligence checks and make sure everything's lined up before signing the grant funding award. Once we've done the initial assessment stage, so prior to due diligence, we will notify you of whether or not your application has been successful. And at this point, we will also provide feedback by email to all applicants, with the hope that if you have unfortunately been unsuccessful, this feedback can help to perhaps prepare you for a future application. And it's worth noting that projects requesting more than 3 million for deep decarbonisation grant funding, or 7 million for energy efficiency, may be asked to take part in an additional scrutiny phone call with BEIS officials and assessors as part of our assessment process. And then finally, looking ahead, if you're unable to apply for this current window, there will be further opportunities to apply this year. We're looking towards May and October 2022 for further competition windows. They will follow a similar format to this competition window, so please do look out for further details as they're published. But as others have already said, we really would encourage you to apply as soon as possible. All the funding must be spent by March 2025, and we want to give people as much opportunity to be able to submit successful applications and get their projects off the ground. And if you have any questions after this webinar, which we haven't been able to answer yet, then please do contact us at the email address here, ietf@beis.gov.uk, and we will do our best to answer your questions and support your application in any way we can. Thank you for listening, is the last thing I have to say there, and I will be passing back over to Jenny, I believe.
Thank you very much, Bess. That was great. And thank you to Lily as well. Okay, so now it's time to have your questions answered. We have had a few come in. If you have any more, this is your chance to ask a question during today's event, your only chance. You'll be able to obviously book a one-to-one with BEIS after the event, but if you do have a burning question, please type it into the chat box on YouTube and we'll try and cover it for you now. So the first question that was come in from Steve Minette is there's very little support on their carbon reduction journey, which includes looking at energy streams. So he was asking, are there any other funds, or can the Ietf help with that? Lily, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. And I think the question here is also coming from a company that's sort of a large scale company, so recognising that there might be a bit less support available when you are in those larger categories of business. So firstly, if it's general energy policy, there are a few different strands of policy that have been set out in the net zero strategy. So this includes the overall government direction in terms of how we'll be supporting introduction of low carbon fuels. So that includes different strands of support for technologies like hydrogen, so both helping suppliers to produce lower cost, affordable, low carbon hydrogen, as well as helping you to deploy that hydrogen on your site through streams like the Ietf. In terms of sort of wider support, there is support available through the innovation competitions offered through the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio. So if you're looking to deploy, for example, novel heat pump technologies or fuel switches that perhaps haven't been tried before in your specific process, then those would be good to have a look at. Otherwise, I really would hope that the Ietf is broad enough in its scope that there might be something that's available to you to help you to reduce your emissions and reduce your energy use. So if you've got a question or any sort of uncertainty about what the different range of technologies are there, all of the resources that Jenny's going to mention in a little bit might give you an idea of the kinds of projects that would be in scope. That's
great, thanks Lily. And obviously do get in touch with BEIS if you want to describe the project in a bit more detail through the eligibility checker email. You're welcome to have a chat with them in more detail. So our next question is from Simon Mosley. He's asked, is the replacement of existing assets with new technology that's not yet mainstream in scope? So for an example, the HyNet project. So Salman, would you like to take that one?
Hi, yeah, so generally, if it's replacing existing components on site, that would be eligible, but I'm not clear what he means by components that don't exist. They would need to be at the appropriate TRL levels. So that is 7 and above for deep decarbonization projects and 8 and above for energy efficiency projects to be eligible.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. The next question is from the water industry, TV. Does the Ietf just help to reduce carbon emissions, or will it fund the reduction of greenhouse gases? So Salman, would you like to take that one too?
Yeah, so simply it would be CO2 equivalent emissions. So that is all greenhouse gases that have been converted to the equivalent effect of what carbon would have on the atmosphere.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Next up, we have Manoa Sadiq, who's asked, is the fund, sorry, wrong one, are low carbon construction material manufacturing sites in scope? Salman, would you like to take that one as well?
Yeah, so simply if the sites are already manufacturing the low carbon materials and they have proposals to manufacture those same materials with a more energy efficient method, then or they have proposals of how to decarbonize the actual manufacturing process, they'll be within scope. However, we don't account for embodied emissions during the assessment phase, so that's something to be mindful of.
But maybe if they were changing the materials that they were using to create these construction materials, the feedstock, and that led to a reduction in the manufacturing process, that would be okay.
Yes.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, moving on, we have a question from Mark Corbett. I think this is probably one for Bess. Can trade associations support applications into the Ietf?
Thanks, Jenny. So it depends a little bit what you mean by support, but in terms of being formal project partners, they can't be project partners. Project partners could be a business of any size, a research organisation, a research and technology organisation, an academic institution, a charity or a public sector organisation. So I'm afraid those are the rules for the eligibility of project partners. But as I say, depends a bit what you mean by support. So happy to discuss further, of course. So get in touch if there's a particular angle you can see.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you. Next we have Kashmir Lohal. He has a farm with solar and bioenergy already, and he's wondering if the Ietf grant will allow him to convert that energy into hydrogen as a way of storing that renewable energy on his farm. So Salman, would you like to take that one?
Yes, so unfortunately, Ietf cannot support the deployment of any renewable generation or for any fuel production, which includes generating hydrogen from renewables. Okay,
thank you very much. Next, we had a question from Scott Mallock about the EU ETS, the Energy Emissions Trading Scheme, and comparing it to the UK Emissions Trading Scheme. Unfortunately, we can't answer those questions because it's not really relevant to today's event, but we'll get in touch with you after the event with a link to be able to connect you up with the right person that can help you with that question. So next is a question from Michael Todd from CPI. And he's asked if we need to develop a prototype to help inform a feasibility study, would that cost be eligible? I'll pass that one to Lily.
Yeah, thanks very much. So again, on this one, it would be really good to understand a little bit more about the project and the scope exactly of what you want to do. As a simple rule, standardly, we wouldn't cover the costs of developing a prototype. That would tend to signify that the process is more at the R&D stage, that perhaps other competitions like the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator program might be more suited, because they'd be able to provide not just the relevant costs, but also the relevant overall package of support in terms of the way that you'd be helped through the application process, the way that you'd be monitored, etc., is more likely to be relevant to a prototype project. As I said, the sort of only costs we can cover through the studies are really the costs associated with sort of temporary use of equipment, testing, use of consultants, use of your own staff's time. Those would typically be in scope rather than prototype development.
Lovely, thank you, Lily. And I think probably the next question from Divya Puri is a similar thing. It's talking about can the engineering study be, can you do an off-site trial to test a chosen technology on a novel feedstock, which does sound more innovation maybe than preparing for deployment. So in both cases, I'll get in touch with you after the event, where KTN's also supporting the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator Fund, so I'll pass some information on to you for that one. Okay, next question we have John Booth. What are you expected to see in the data center strand? Data centers are very complex environments and also have a high risk profile, so it'd be useful to get a steer of the types of things that could be funded to help a data center to decarbonize. So Lily, would you like to try that one as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, I can't point you to any case studies that are currently published around data centres, but we have had a certain amount of interest from the sector, and we'd really be interested to have a talk with you as well if you've got some ideas. Generally, the kinds of projects that would be in scope would all be around how do you make the cooling process for the data centre more efficient. So we've said that we don't generally support building heating and cooling, but of course for data centres, the cooling is integral to the way in which the whole process runs. So if you're looking at perhaps upgrading your existing equipment, perhaps installing better transformers or sort of upgrading processes within that, all of those things could be covered within the scope of the Ietf. We're aware that there are some really complex contracts that exist between centres themselves and perhaps their end users. So again, if you've got any questions about how that contract might work within the scope of the competition, just come and have a talk with us. But hopefully there should be ample support available to you.
Lovely, thank you very much, Lily. Next question from Michael Todd. Can we put together a package of related innovations that combine to deliver the impact required, or can a single application just be a single technology? Bess, would you like to take that one?
I think I might need to actually pass to Lily or Salman on that one.
No problem. Lily, do you want to grab that one then? So does it have to be a single technology per application, or can you bundle things together?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So ultimately, we want you to apply in the way that makes most sense for the different proposals that you have at hand. So if you've developed a technology solution, you want to go ahead with it, and it's relatively independent of any other different pieces of investment or studies that you might be doing, it might make sense for you to apply for that technology in its own right. But if you do have various different technology solutions that can all be defined separately, so that would generally be that the process that they could be applied to is different, so perhaps different stages of your production line, or the kind of technology is different, so maybe you are looking at a heat pump to improve the energy efficiency of a process, and then you're looking to also upgrade perhaps some fans or heaters on your site. They are all very clearly different technology solutions, take place different parts of your industrial process. So what you could do is bundle them up within one application. As I said, there's benefits to that because it can help you to meet the minimum thresholds. Those different technology solutions could be either at one site or across different sites, provided that they're all owned by the same lead applicant company and the project team undertaking all of the work is the same for all of those projects. You're not at all advantaged or disadvantaged in the process if you do aggregate. So we take each of those proposals separately and we assess them separately as well. So it very much depends on what works best for you in terms of the process.
That's great, thanks very much. And now I'm afraid we have to have our last question from Martin Croft. I think this probably, again, might be one for you, Lily. Would UK organisations with sites in England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, but with the headquarters of the company in Scotland, be eligible for their English sites under the Ietf?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Unfortunately, within the scope of the competition, you would fall out of scope for the Ietf. It is worth talking to our Scottish counterparts, the Scottish Government, about whether you might fall in scope for their competition, even for the sites that aren't based inside Scotland, as they have some slightly different eligibility rules. But unfortunately, for various sort of subsidy control reasons, we've had to define ourselves just based on where you're registered. If it's okay as well, I'd just like to go back to a question that was raised a little earlier about scope of support for trade associations, and just to mention as well, so I think we've been looking at our guidance and reading it sort of very strictly, and of course trade associations can fall under the category of a sort of not-for-profit organisation. So given that's the case, you would be eligible to be a project partner. So just to clarify that as well for anyone that might be interested in applying on that basis.
That's great. Well, thank you to all of our speakers and Q&A people today. That's been really helpful. For everybody else that posted a question that we haven't managed to get to today, I will follow up with you after the event so that you have an answer to your question. So thank you all very much for contributing. We're now going to have a short coffee break, but before we do, I just want to talk you through our Mentimeter survey. So you'll see on the screen now, we have a code. You can use the QR code or you can type in www.mentee.com. When you get in there, pop in the code where it asks you to put the code in, and you'll find 5 questions that we would like you to answer. Very easy, shouldn't take you very long at all. Maybe make your tea first and then do the questions, but it shouldn't take you very long at all. And it will really help us with the future competition windows for the Ietf funding. So we appreciate your feedback on that code. But please do now go and have a break. We'll be back at 11:20. So we'll see you then. Thank you. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you did have a chance to get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and to fill in our survey. We now move on to give you some ideas of what you could do at your industrial site if you're struggling with what to do. First of all, we're going to have 2 speakers who were funded in the first round of the Ietf in summer 2020. They're from 2 different manufacturing sectors, but both have an energy efficiency deployment, so you get some different ideas of what you could do. And our first presentation is from Sebastian Roginski from the Saint-Gobain Glass. Sebastian is the engineering manager at Saint-Gobain Glass, and he's going to tell us about their furnace replacement. So over to you, Sebastian.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Jenny. I'm really pleased to be presenting you the project that Saint-Gobain Glass concluded last year, and we're now seeing the benefits. This project started as we've looked into investing in Eggborough site, where I currently work, and I'm responsible for all the engineering activities. So this site was built in 2000. It's a large site with over 775 acres of land, employing over 200 employees. And it's one of the most technologically advanced plants in Saint-Gobain Group, producing 3.2 meter wide glass ribbon that is predominantly then cut to size and used in the building industry. We produce glass in varying sizes and thicknesses between 2.9 and 12 millimeters. The output of the plant was 185,000 tons per annum, and thanks to the project that we concluded last year, that will now increase. It's an automated production that operates round the clock, doesn't stop, and we also invested in coating and laminating facilities in early days of the plant, so we can add value to our products. So what you can see on the screen now is the process that we use for production of glass. So we prepare our raw materials in a batch house that are then delivered to the furnace, where they are melted and glass is refined, and we then pour our glass onto the molten tin, where we shape the glass ribbon that is then being dragged via the annealing layer, where the glass is annealed before being cooled and delivered into the cutting line. So why did we look at Ietf, and what was the requirement to look at energy efficiency? Well, the plant was coming to the end of life. Typical glass plant lasts between 15 to 20 years. We managed, by maintaining the plant very well, stretch it to 21 years. And we had to replace the furnace. So we had an option. We had an option to rebuild as it was, which in this case for Ietf was the counterfactual case, and that was estimated at the time as £30 million investment on its own. But also, you know, there is an opportunity, and technology advances that we could make improvements and increase the furnace and line efficiency, that then in turn could reduce the fuel requirement and increase the the glass output, which in turn reduces the energy required per glass of a ton of glass produced. And those, after evaluation, we recognize that this investment will be approximately £4.5 million. So that was the case that we prepared for Ietf, and we explained that this investment is not guaranteed, and it would not necessarily go ahead. And that was the case in our sister plant in Stolberg, that only had the rebuild completed a year before, and the company was unable to invest in energy efficiency in that plant. So we submitted the case, and certainly that has enables to progress this investment and deliver the benefits. And I would like to talk to you about the scopes to give you an idea what you can think that could be included. So the majority of the investment was centered around the improvement of energy and capability of the furnace, and that included better design of the furnace, including the two patented solutions, ancillary and utilities control system upgrade to enable us to deliver the energy efficiency. But in order to realize the capability of the furnace that was on the same footprint, but gaining energy efficiency through the improved design. We had to make changes on the line, and that included the batch house to make sure that we were able to sustain the higher output of the furnace, but also the annealing layer and the cutting line, in particular on the cutting line, to be able to evacuate more cullet and recycle it back into the process, so we could reuse it and further reduce the raw materials required and improve the energy efficiency of our process. So that was our scope. The investment altogether was over £30 million, and the eligible costs, and that's a very important word, eligible, were just on the £5 million. So we had to work very diligently, going through all the costs. What would the investment look like if we weren't investing in the energy efficiency, and then separating those that are associated with the energy efficiency improvement. So we were able to secure the Ietf grant of £1.4 million, and at the application stage, we estimated that we will deliver over 75,000 megawatt hours reduction in gas consumption per annum, significant, 276,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions over the lifetime of the installation. And also, this investment would allow us to increase the output of the plant by 60 tons of flat glass per day, lifting it from 640 to 700 tons per day. I'm pleased to say that thanks to the investment, we are seeing the real benefits. And, for the last 3 months since the operation of the start of the furnace in August, we have seen over 20% reduction in gas, but also electrical consumption in comparison to the 2018 reference, which is the reference period that we will be monitored and verified against as part of the Ietf submission. So we estimated as part of design and as part of submission that those returns will be lower, around 18%, and I'm pleased that we're seeing higher than that. I think some project highlights. We essentially delivered the project and managed the project in-house. So we went out to the new firm, to suppliers to use our solutions to implement them on plant. New line equipment and furnace installation was tendered into the market with equipment suppliers to the glass industry. And we applied the best practice in procurement to make sure we deliver the value for the money for ourselves, but also for the taxpayer that also supported this investment. Project team, the project overall cold repair was led by my predecessor, but obviously I was heavily involved in particular supporting the Ietf application that was prepared by one of our project engineers, and we had support from a consultant because it was the first time we were doing this kind of application, and that support has helped us to develop a really good application and clearly secure the funding. Obviously, we have now been through the whole process, and I can say that once you get shortlisted and finally sign the documentation for the grant funding, the process of executing the project is managed and supported by a monitoring officer, and that is really well managed and is very supportive for the applicants. So I would say that for those that will be successful, they should not worry. So our project duration was 4 months in terms of project execution, and then there is a period when you're closing the invoices and claiming the grant, which is something to plan for. So some points that I wanted to share with you, having been through the process. When you're looking at your projects, try to separate the costs, especially if you are not just doing a greenfield type application. Try to separate the costs which are associated with the improvement and which are not, especially if there is maintenance involved. That needs to be considered. One very important point is project starts at effective date of the contract signed between the Ietf and applicant. We were very tight for timescales, and Ietf has helped us to make sure that we signed all the necessary paperwork just in time for our project to be executed. But that's important because you cannot claim any costs unless they are post the signatures of contract. Project ends when the invoices are settled. So you've got the evidence that the money has left the bank. Otherwise, you will not get the grant payment. So when you're planning your dates, think about this, please. In your application, it's easy to fill the words, and I think it's key that you answer the question and pay attention to what other assessors are going to look for in the question you're answering. Certainly, we had some help with this, and it's something that we've learned from the first application we did. Having start to focusing on getting your prices and quotes early, trying to do it just on estimates is going to be tricky. And also when it then comes to allocation of costs into particular areas, it might be difficult later on because you will have to justify trying to move the costs between different categories. And in that case, you may lose some grant funding if not careful. So just worth considering this at the beginning. Team at Ietf is really helpful. Get in touch. These sessions are great. Link up with them, and I'm sure they will answer your questions. And something that we at Saint-Gobain discussed at the start of the project, the process appeared tough going and difficult and long, but I can say that having been through this already, it is on reflection relatively easy. You just need to communicate with the team at Ietf, and you will get through this. And that's our project. It was really proud about the investment that the company, with support from BASE and Ietf, has made at Tegborough, and we will be operating this plant for the next 20 years. And we're really thankful for the support. And I wish you good luck with your application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. That was great. A great example of what can be done with the Ietf funding. So next, our second case study is from Riccardo Balducci, who's the Energy and Environment Director at Sofidel. Riccardo's going to talk to us about the heat recovery project, the system that they're deploying, which is reducing the energy consumption of their tissue paper manufacturing process. So over to you, Riccardo.
Good morning, everyone.
Oh, you're quite quiet there, Riccardo. Are you able to turn the volume up?
There's a problem. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I can hear you very quietly. Macaulay, is that just me, or is that the video feed as well?
During the test, everything seems okay. Jamie, can you tell me if everyone is okay? household kind of application. Software is the second largest European paper producer in Europe and the fifth largest around the world. Just some numbers to give you the dimension of the company, almost 7,000 employees, €2 billion of turnover. We are in 14 countries with 1.4.
I'm so sorry, Riccardo, to interrupt you. It's really hard to hear what you're saying. I don't know what to suggest. If using a headset should make it clearer, but it is really crackly.
Can you hear me? Is it better now?
That's a little bit better, yeah. Sorry to keep interrupting you. I want to make sure.
No problem. Maybe when the phone is not so good. So, okay, a number on the screen, and my description here was not very helpful. Of course, software sustainability in its keys, let's say, pillars of the business strategy, and the sustainability itself is driven by the United Nations SDGs. You know, as glass before, paper is another sector with a very energy intense consumption, and particularly water consumption. Our raw material is coming from as a natural resource, is wood in the end. So we have to keep carefully into consideration sustainability in all the dimensions, so environment, human, and of course, economics. And here we are in Sofitel UK, Baglan site. Sofitel operates 4 industrial sites in the UK, 3 in England and 1 in Wales, South Wales. Baglan Bay is inside an energy park, not so far from Cardiff. This is our last greenfield in the United Kingdom. The paper mill has been built in 2006. Now is employing more than 300 people. It's developed on 33 hectares and able to produce close to 85,000 ton of paper, finished paper per year. Our process is fed with, of course, power, electricity, and natural gas. Our energy mix is 2/3 natural gas and 1/3 power. It is taken by the public grid in the United Kingdom. Of course, Sofitel is into the UK ETS directive. It is a very important reason to reduce energy consumption, especially the fuel consumption. You know, the so-called Scope 1 carbon emission are the ones that is accounted for the UK ETS purposes. Now the cost is very high indeed, like the cost of the fuel itself is not a secret. Our site is located into this industrial cluster, one of the 6 in the United Kingdom. It is being defined one of the key areas for the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund. South Wales in particular, it is eligible under the Ietf for subsidy up to 45% of the total eligible cost. So it's an area where the Ietf support more than in other places. The investment that I'm going to explain before the availability of the Ietf was not considered enough appealing for the company due to the very high cost of installation. Now with the Ietf, we went ahead and we were happy to be awarded with this funding, and of course the investment has started. The project is a couple of different technology. The name, our commercial name of the developer of this technology, that is Valmet. Valmet It is a Swedish company, leader in paper technology all over the world. Valmet has been also the company who provided all the paper technology for the installation of Bagan Bay. The project formally started last year. The operation of building has started this year, indeed. And we plan to complete the installation of the new technology by the end of November 2022. Now I'm going to explain what is the technology we are going to install. Very briefly, this is a picture of the dry end of a paper machine, in particular of the tissue machine. The tissue paper is dried by a combination of mechanical and thermal effect. The mechanical effect is much more efficient in dewatering the paper, where thermal effect needs, of course, fuel and is a little bit less efficient. So all paper maker nowadays is looking into much more mechanical efficiency than thermal. The project is aimed at increasing the mechanical effect, introducing this pisconip, which is a special kind of press, and the redrive, that is a device aimed at recovering heat that we're not using in this moment. So it is an interesting application of waste heat. This is a picture of this pisconip. It's a roll press, a special one, that is equipped with a special kind of fluid that can make the profile of the roll press flexible in order to increase the mechanical effect on the paper. It is now pressed with more pressure, and in a way that can increase the mechanical dewatering of the paper, also increasing the quality, because in this way the paper is not only more dry but also more soft. The advantage redry is a technology recovering heat for the exhaust of the drying system, and taking it, in an area where it is interesting for and crucial for the drying system of the paper machine. It is not really an innovation, but the cost of the installation is very high compared with the amount of heat it is able to recover. The combination of the two technology, it's allow an impressive increase in efficiency. Here is a picture of the combination of the two technologies. So the roll press together with the heat recovery system. So for a chemical physical effect, so the increasing of the dryness of the paper, in the end can increase the thermal efficiency and also the softness of the paper and the runnability of the paper machine itself. What we are expecting from this combination of two technologies is an increase of 4–5% of the dryness of the paper. That means an important increasing into energy saving, because every 1 point of dryness increase, it equates to a 4–5% saving on thermal energy. This is our primary source of energy. It generated cost reduction. It generates carbon emission reduction, of course. It improves the quality of paper, especially where software, especially in a sector that is much more competitive, since consumer is looking for comfort, but also sustainability. This technology is helping software in general in reaching the commitment to decarbonize all the company operation, not only UK, but all over the world where software has installation, industrial installation. The result we are expecting is a reduction of 20,000 megawatt hour per year in fuel consumption, so approximately 17% of saving. Unfortunately, there is an increase of power consumption. This is what we are expecting, even if the balance is definitely an advantage, because for this amount of power, there is a much bigger amount in thermal consumption, gas consumption. The result is a net reduction. So keeping into account the increasing emission of the scope 2 carbon due to the power increase, but also keeping into account the reduction of emission thanks to the reduction in fuel, the net result is 3,400 tons less of CO2 for the single installation in Padua. That's all. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Riccardo. That was great. And another great example of what can be done with the Ietf funding. So a huge thank you to both of our case study speakers for being able to join us today and share what they've been doing. If you do have questions for either Sebastian or Riccardo, then please get in touch with me and I'll try and connect you to them if you want to learn more about what they've been doing. But thank you again to both of our presentations. We're now going to move on to our technology pitches. So we have 10 companies that are going to do a 2 to 3 minute pitch about the technology that they have to offer to industrial sites out there that might be thinking of doing something with the Ietf funding. So this is quite short and snappy. 2 to 3 minutes goes very quickly. But all of our pitches are prepped and ready. So I'm going to ask our first pitcher, Andrea Foccia from Aston University. I'm sorry about my pronunciation now, I'm sure that was wrong. If you would like to start your pitch now, that would be great.
Hello. Hi, hello, Jenny. And thank you very much for this opportunity to pitching. Hope you can hear me well. So I work at Aston University, which is located in the West Midlands in the center of Birmingham. And we are in general committed to have an impact on our external stakeholders, and particularly industry. And I cover the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences as a business development manager. And today I would like to spotlight on the Energy and Bioproduct Research Institute. As you can see in the picture, it's beautiful. And because it hosts internationally renowned experts in the energy-related fields, like biomass conversion, hydrogen synthesis, fuel cells, energy from waste, catalysis, both usage and design, carbon capture technology, I was mentioning earlier in the chat, biochar, and in the light of today Ietf call event, energy storage and efficiency. So I would be very happy to connect with anyone interested in knowing more about that. I have a profile on Mojo, and Muhammad Imran, the lecturer who is leading this technology within the EBRI, also has a profile there. So please feel free to connect with him as well. Next slide, please. So in a nutshell, the project idea, as Imran especially designed it, is to use low temperature and waste heat to electrical power conversion technology using supercritical CO2 and organic Rankine cycles. And these novel system configurations, along with the next generation working fluids, will lead to higher performances and lower cost compared to off-the-shelf solutions already available on the market. What we can offer is both feasibility studies and demonstrations. And we are looking for industries or in general third-party partners with waste heat on the site, so that applying this technology they can have improvement in efficiencies and cost saving. Thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to connect.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Next up, we have Francis Lemp from Carno Limited.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Francis Lemp, one of the co-founders and directors of Carno, and we're a startup formed specifically with the mission to tackle one of the biggest billion-dollar problems of net zero at the moment, which is decarbonising the very hardest to abate sectors, such as long-haul transport and in particular industrial power. And we're doing this through the development of very high efficiency, zero emission ceramic engines. Next slide, please. So the core technology and the crux of it is that the core issue with modern engines is that cooling systems, which are traditionally used to prevent metallic components and engines from melting, lead to incredibly large amounts of wasted energy and very high emissions as a result. And so we've patented a design that uses advanced technical ceramics that are able to withstand combustion temperatures, that eliminate this need for cooling system and subsequently wasted energy, and bring game-changing efficiencies twice that of modern engines, but crucially enable net zero capability. And so one of our core value propositions for industry is that we offer a fuel agnostic technology that offers industry an accelerated pathway to net zero independent of developing infrastructure, unlike fuel cells and battery electric. And so we're looking to undertake a feasibility and/or engineering study to look at replacing existing diesel reliance in industry, assess the economic and environmental impact of using our technology, and develop a plan to deploy our ultra-efficient engines on site. And so we're seeking an industrial partner, preferably in the mining, quarrying, data centers or manufacturing sectors. But we're open to any industrial partner that has clear goals to reduce their reliance on diesel and fossil fuels, both in direct power and road transport, off-highway vehicles, but you know, with a clear goal to decarbonize their operations sustainably. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francis. Okay, next we have Tim Hare from DNV. Over to you, Tim. We can't hear you though, so you might still be on mute.
Let's try again.
There we go.
Good morning. My name's Tim Hare. I'm head of sales for DNV Energy Systems in UK and Ireland. DNV are a Norwegian-owned foundation. And what this means is it allows us to invest in research and also to be independent. We are around 14,000 people globally, with 1,000 people in the UK. And we provide independent assurance and risk management services and solutions which help our customers manage their risk and to understand the complexity of the energy system. Next slide, please. So we don't have a technology, but we can provide insights that will help you reduce the risks of deploying new technology, which will help you improve certainty. And what's different about us? We provide a trusted, unbiased, independent view on solutions with a whole systems perspective. We can offer technical, digital, and commercial experts that ask simple questions like, is it safe? Will it work? Will it comply? And is there certainty? We are seeking a lead applicant that needs support in the reduction of emissions or help with the deployment of a new technology. Please get in touch with myself, Tim Hare, on LinkedIn, or my colleague Graham Fays, also on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. And next up, we have Graham Downs from Environmental Treatment Concepts. Over to you, Graham.
Am I unmuted?
No, you're perfect.
Super. Right. So my name's Graham Downs. I'm the process scientist for a small SME called Environmental Treatment Concepts. We specialise and have done for over 30 years in the physical treatment or chemical-free water treatment of mainly potable water systems. What we're now moving into is process and effluent streams. Next slide, please. So what is physical water treatment? Well, physical water treatment devices use frequency modulation to create an alternating electromagnetic field that is applied to a fluid flow in a pipe by means of an external inductor coil. The EMF field promotes agitation of the charged particles in the fluid, such as bicarbonates, which in turn promotes carbon dioxide stripping and the production of microbubbles, which in turn do some of the work. This has considerable potential in solid separation in wastewater treatment plants, especially those plants that use dissolved air flotation as primary separation. Improving DAF performance can bring significant benefits come with the secondary treatment plant that is often after the primary treatment, was obviously quite often a biological plant, and so that's the of many within a waste treatment plant itself. Having done prototype trials with a milk processing factory, we were able to show that by improving separation in the DAF plant, we could reduce energy consumption in the secondary plant by about 20%. We believe the solution is innovative as it uses no additional chemicals, it's very, very low energy, and can be retrofitted to existing assets with no requirement to shut down. So it actually provides a very, very green and carbon-free solution. When it is installed, the main effect is that it broadens the performance spectrum of the primary separation process, which helps buffer the critical secondary plant against various flows and loads that may come from the processing facility or the factory or whatever. As I mentioned previously, we are an SME and we provide a bespoke service of this equipment, which starts from survey, installation and monitoring downstream and after installation to prove that our installations are doing what they say on the tin. And we're currently seeking industrial partners who would perhaps have a factory or a food and beverage, or more particularly a DAF plant, which would be looking to a longer term demonstration project where we can actually prove just how much savings this sort of technology and innovation can provide, or alternatively manufacturers of DAF plants who may wish to be adding a little bit of value added to their existing products for sale. Obviously, if anybody is interested, my details are available through the this group and email address in the front of this slideshow.
That's great, thank you very much. Yeah, just to add to what Graham was saying there, all of the people pitching today will be on the networking platform, but you can also get in touch with me if you want to be connected to anyone as well. The slides will be shared with you after the event. So next up we have Mark Allen from the Materials Processing Institute. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, you're very crackly. Try that again. Mark? We can't hear you, Mark, I'm afraid.
Hello?
Oh, yes, there you are.
All right. 2 changes. That's right. So, I'll just go. We're a non-profit research and technology centre. We have a long track record working metals.
I'm sorry, Mark, we really can't hear you very well. I'll move on to the next picture and then maybe we could come back to you, if that's okay. So next up we have Yassine Ouari from QIO. Over to you, Yassine.
Hi, good afternoon. First, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're perfect.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to pitch today. My name is Yassine Ouari, and I'm head of product here at QIO. I'm stepping in for Dan Stover, our COO, who couldn't make it today. We are a UK startup and we develop AI solutions to help industrial companies improve the energy efficiency of their manufacturing processes. We've worked with companies like Rolls-Royce, Arc International, a glass tableware maker, and the NHS, along with others, automotive, cement, and steel companies. And we've seen up to 15% reductions in energy use without replacing equipment or installing additional monitoring. Next slide, please. So today, inefficiently operated plant machinery is responsible for about 7% of global greenhouse gas emissions. According to the International Energy Agency, these could be avoided through improved energy and materials efficiency measures. We're proposing the deployment of our AI software solution called Foresight Optima, which automatically learns and recommends the best control settings to use on specific equipment such as pumps, compressors, furnaces, kilns, boilers, and so on. These recommended settings ensure that the assets are consistently operated at a higher efficiency, using the minimum amount of energy to produce the maximum amount of high quality product. So what's innovative about it, this isn't a reporting analytics tool, this is a real-time automated system that runs in sync with the plant's SCADA or MES control systems, and it guides operators on what to do right now. It's also very quick to deploy, and it can be connected and up and running in often less than a day. Today, we're looking for industrial partners who'd like to trial it on site, equipment vendors who would consider bolting it onto their control systems, and also consulting partners to help deploy this as part of a wider digital transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasin, that was great. So if we could pop back to Mark now and see if he's coming through any clearer. Just give it one more try, Mark. Would you like to?
I've unmuted there. How are we?
That sounds much better. Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. So the Materials Processing Institute, we are a non-profit research and technology centre. We have decades of experience developing new materials and processes and technologies, and lots of that has been around troubleshooting, problem solving, and integrating new technology to improve efficiency, particularly in the iron, steel, and metal sector. But we now have specialist teams, expert teams in circular economy, decarbonisation, industrial efficiency, materials development, and digital transformation. So we have a lot of interest in the various aspects of efficiency that the Ietf represents. If we could have the next slide, please. So we're here to help you, basically. Your idea could be around efficiency technologies, particularly where you're looking for this leg up to make it make the numbers stack up for you. You're on the verge of looking at projects, but you're feeling you need the Ietf help, and particularly on some of the studies to help you with decision making and de-risking. So that could be around heat recovery, thermal efficiency or heat storage, or whatever, around combustion efficiency, electrification, applications of smarter controls, even just getting the meters and monitors into hard to reach places, and process optimizations, but also around the deeper decarbonisation opportunities for fuel switching or process changes. We can work with you on the feasibility or engineering study levels, or actually assisting with advice during the deployments as well. And in terms of partnering with you for putting proposals together, that could be for the implementation delivery, but also some support with the management and reporting and energy saving monitoring, measurement and metering, verification, and those sides of it, particularly if you're an SME and need a little bit of extra technical support in some specialist areas. So partners we're looking for under the programme are industrial sites with the vision, commitment, some technology in view, but trying to make sense of the numbers and make the case for the extra assistance from this fund to make major savings. So please get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, so we'll now have Andrew Mwinzadeh from Fermancy. So over to you, Andrew.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, that's great.
Excellent. Hi, thanks, Jenny. Yeah, I'm Andrew Mwinzadeh from Fermancy. At Fermancy, we produce equipment to help pump owners reduce their pumping energy usage. We're a UK-based company with a lot of experience within the company developing and also using the equipment. Over the years, we've completed many projects also for companies, again, inside within the UK and also overseas. and they tend to include water and wastewater companies, factories, steelworks, and basically many companies, many plants where they make use of water pumps. Next slide, please, Jenny. Now, to optimize pumping operations, we need data, but it's usually not easy to collect what we need from site equipment. Typically, like flow measurement is the most difficult parameter to record on site. So for this reason, Mentee have produced equipment to overcome these difficulties. And also, to get better understanding of pumping operations, we usually tend to fit equipment to the pumps and pumping systems, and that allows us to continuously record and analyze the performance of the pump. So in summary, we can provide two options to optimize your pumping operations. One is to supply the equipment for you to fit to your pumps, or two, for us to provide a service where we fit the equipment and collect the data, and that usually happens over many months. But in both cases, the aim is to reduce the energy usage. So please feel free to sort of contact me. My details are on the website and available at any time. So thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was great. Next up is Alex Johnston from Translational Energy Research Centre.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's great, Alex.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Johnston, representing the Translational Energy Research Centre. We are a national research and testing facility in low carbon technologies, hosted at the University of Sheffield. We are part funded by BASE and Ietf. We cover almost all technologies in scope of the Ietf competition, and our site is completely interconnected. We have more than 20 pilot scale rigs, and that enables us to integrate all these different technologies. We also have supply on site of green hydrogen, of captured CO2, pretty much everything you need for testing. We are a research organization, but we exist to support industry. So that's why we have some higher TRL technologies for knowledge transfer, implementation, improving performance, but also novel technology to bring that fundamental research and innovation ready for industry to the marketplace. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we're open to any project ideas. I've put a couple of examples here of things we could work with you on. For instance, we can replicate flue gas on site. We can also provide technical advice, do that testing with you, looking at hydrogen fuel switching as well, amongst many, many other things. Innovation is at the heart of what we do. And as I said, we have a range of TRL on site. For instance, on the higher range, we have a gasifier and combined heat and power unit, and waste to energy and ORC rig for heat recovery, but also the next generation carbon capture technologies, hydrogen power micro CHP, and also quite a lot of expertise on sustainable aviation fuels, which is a bit outside of what we're talking about today. We can support feasibility studies, deployment, either through our expertise or by de-risking your projects with pilot scale testing. So I hope we can work together. We're open to any industry partners of any size. And I think you have my email on the previous slides. Please feel free to add me on LinkedIn, and I'm also on the Mojo meeting platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. That's great. Up next, we have Tom White from Veolia.
Hi, Jenny. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, that's great, Tom. Off you go.
Super. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Tom White. I'm the business development lead for Veolia's industrial energy business here in the UK. At Veolia, we've seen how the climate crisis and adoption of net zero targets has applied pressure to businesses of all shapes and sizes to decarbonise and generally to become more sustainable. The Ietf is absolutely critical towards decarbonising high energy industries. It brings exciting opportunities for business transformation, and I'd briefly like to talk you through how Veolia can support you in realising these opportunities. To reach net zero by 2050 or sooner, support and collaboration is required between business and industries. Next slide, please. So at Veolia, we're offering a range of services to help you to achieve funding from initiatives like the Ietf and to support you on your decarbonisation journey. We can support you through the application process. We can advise on the best projects for your own site, as each and every premises has its own unique challenges. This includes design, build, operate and maintain, as well as potentially finance. Veolia will be with you every step of the way, and every detail is tailored to your own business. Our teams have proven experience in successful funding applications for our customers. Most recently, we've developed opportunities with 2 clients where they received funds from the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme Phase 1, securing around £7 million of investment. We've also got 3 further PSDS Phase 2 opportunities about to come to fruition and 2 subject to final checks. So some very positive results from some very exciting projects. Some examples of useful technologies that Veolia can support through the Ietf include heat exchangers to capture waste from other processes, deployment of heat pumps to displace fossil fuel boilers, equipment system upgrades such as burner upgrades, and also SCADA upgrades that aim to improve controls and increase your energy efficiency. So if you're interested in discovering more about how Veolia can support you and your business through securing Ietf and delivering the solutions, then please do get in touch with myself or one of the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. That's great. And last but not least, we have Ross Ryan from MTC.
Hello everyone. Hopefully I've hit the unmute button.
You have, that's great.
Good. So I've passed my first test. Lovely. So I'm Ross Ryan. I'm engaged in supporting businesses and their developmental needs at the Manufacturing Technology Centre. Our remit is to help upgrade industrial processes and their various transformations to achieve a net zero objective. We are part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult, so a network of research and technology centres. We in particular are based in the Midlands, but have 4 centres across the UK with 800 people. My contact details are on there, which are kindly going to be shared, or indeed you can find me on LinkedIn. Can we go to the next page, please? So briefly in summary, as a research and technology organisation, and in support of this fund's objectives, we're able to do studies, feasibility and engineering studies, which will focus on your industrial application where energy efficiency or indeed decarbonisation is the focus. We're particularly proficient in the area of energy efficiency, and I'll come on and talk about a specific example in one moment. But we're also proficient in the deployment of technology at an industrial scale. We are really an innovation centre, and it's about re-engineering manufacturing processes, but bearing in mind we often start fundamentally at the product design. So we heard earlier in the example about a tissue and how it needs to be drier. So product requirements are key in the manufacturing process, and so indeed is the upskilling of the workforce. So these are 3 areas that at the MTC we focus in terms of innovation. We draw upon a range of engineering resources. Our competencies are listed here. And in these departments, we have over 500 manufacturing engineers with a range of competencies and experience, particularly in the higher TRL level applications. Under this call, we have an industrial partner who has a specific drying process that we're looking to improve and transform in terms of energy efficiency. So any of you out there, collaborators, industrial partners, who have specific things around product drying at elevated temperatures, and in particular anything to do with wet drying, we'd very pleased to hear from you, because you may well fit nicely into our submission that we're in the process of preparing. Are also prepared to collaborate with others and help you with the application process, and taking you forward. So thank you very much for the Knowledge Transfer Network and BEIS for putting on this opportunity, and it's sounding out from me.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of the 10 companies and organisations that pitched for us today. Hopefully that has given you some ideas. And as I said, some of them are on the networking platform. Hopefully all of them will go on the networking platform now. So if you want to connect with them that way, you can. Otherwise, you will receive the slides from that you've seen today, and they have their contact details on this. So you can get in touch once you receive the slides. So last up now for today, in the last 5-10 minutes, is me. I'm going to take you through some of the support that's available to you as you're applying into the Ietf fund. So I'll take you through help to understand the competition information, help with the application process itself, help to find partners if you don't already have companies to work with, and help to identify eligible and relevant technologies for the Ietf funding. So first, looking at the competition information and the application process, I've provided the link there to the competition guidance. This is BEIS's webpage with all of the information about the 3 competitions and a link to be able to start your application form as well. I'd advise you to have a good read through that. You've heard a lot in detail today, but there's even more within the guidance. So have a read through that first, and then if having read that, you have questions that you need to ask us, then please come and contact us through the ietf@beis.gov.uk email address. That will come to the Ietf team, the dedicated team, who will try to answer your question. If in particular you want to check if you're eligible to apply or if your project is eligible, then if you could use eligibility screening as the title to your email, that will help us to sift those quickly. But if you do have a general question about any of the competitions for scope, eligibility, finding partners, anything at all, then please get in touch through that email. Another opportunity for you to be able to put questions to BEIS and to myself are through our fortnightly competition clinics. So we've run these through all the previous competition windows, and they have been quite popular. It is an open forum, so this isn't one-to-one confidential chats with BEIS. This is whoever on that particular week has a question to ask BEIS, they will be in the room with you. But it is an opportunity to again ask questions about the scope, the eligibility rules, the application process, to ask if your project is in scope. You can do that at the clinics. And you can register for any of those clinics that are taking place in February, March and April at the link I've provided there. So another thing that we've added in particularly for this competition window is a how to apply event. So this is going to be another online event, another webinar taking place on the 1st of March. As you heard from Bess earlier, there have been some changes to the application form, and on the new BEIS portal, it was new in the autumn window anyway. So, getting used to that new portal. We thought it'd be quite useful if we had an online event where we could take you through step by step how to use the new BEIS portal, and also explain the application form question by question to really give you a bit more detail on what it is we're looking for. So it's just to give you the best chance possible to achieve a high score on every question on the application form. We'll also talk about the level of detail that's required, particularly around the finance section. Again, you heard earlier that the amount of information that's required will be covered at this event. And then finally, if you're looking to apply into one of the deployment competitions, we'll also take you through the project benefit calculator and how to populate the cells in there and what the score is saying, so that you understand what we're trying to achieve with that. And there'll be plenty of opportunity through that webinar for you to ask questions as we go along during that day. So if you are interested in that, you can register at the link I've provided now. This is all open for you to register straight away. So moving on to help to find partners. Well, I've mentioned it a few times today, but we have our dedicated Ietf networking platform. The link is there again. You will be sent a link to all of this after today's event as well. Once you register and login details are sent back to you, as you register, you'll be asked for certain information, and that will form the basis of your profile on the platform. But I'd urge you to go in and add more to your account, because that will make it a lot easier for people to be able to find you if they're looking for a particular skill, or if they're looking for a particular manufacturing site to work with. So once you've done that, you can search through the 250 plus people on there. You can either search by company or by person, and you'll be able to direct message them to organise a meeting. The networking platform remains open for the whole of the Ietf programme. So from when it first started all the way through to March 2025, it stays open between the competition windows so that you can carry on networking and preparing for future projects. And as I've said a few times today, there is still an opportunity to book a one-to-one meeting with BAYS that will be taking place this afternoon from 1:30, and also you can have meetings with me too. So if you do want to talk about a specific project idea you have, then why not book a meeting with BAYS today? In terms of finding the right technology, so we've tried to help industrial site owners to understand some of the different options that are out there that they could deploy on their sites. So we've set up, in phase 1, the online technology marketplace. And this is a platform that holds 5-minute videos from different technology providers talking about their technology and the benefits that it would deliver to your site. So they'll say whether it's energy efficiency or decarbonisation, they'll say what TRL level it's at so that you know that it's eligible for the Ietf, and you can connect with them. So the platform is only accessible to eligible industrial site owners. So you can browse these videos at your leisure. If you're a technology provider and you haven't already submitted a video to the marketplace, but you want to raise your profile and let all these potential customers know that how you can help them, then the second link on the page here allows you to register and upload your video. It closes on the 15th of February, so you've got 2 weeks from today to create your video and upload it. I've provided explanations of types of things to cover in your video, but it is entirely up to you. I do vet all the videos to make sure that they are eligible for the Ietf. So please make sure that your technology is reducing the energy efficiency, reducing the energy demand and reducing the carbon emissions associated with that industrial process. Otherwise, you won't be able to have your video on the platform. But it is a great way to raise your profile, and we have 100 industrial sites on there already from previous windows. So it's a great way to showcase what you can do. And the second way that we're helping people to get some ideas of what they could do on their industrial site is by having a technology showcase event. This is a live event taking place on the 10th of March in Birmingham. We do unfortunately have to limit numbers because of COVID. We will be limiting it to 70 people, but we've hired a much bigger room so that we can spread everybody out to make it nice and safe. But if you would like to come and join us, you will hear from some of the funded projects from phase 1. So we heard 2 earlier today. There'll be another 4 that you can hear from at this event. And we also have a speaker from BAYS's Science and Innovation team who are going to come and talk about the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio. So this is their R&D programme. So whereas the Ietf is funding capital investment for you to deploy something straight away, if maybe there's not something on the market that is going to work for you, then maybe a bit of R&D through the NZIP programme is the better option. So if you'd like to come and hear about that, come and join us in Birmingham, and provided again a link for you to register. It is an expression of interest registration, and your place will be either confirmed or declined a couple of weeks before the event. And I think that is it from me. Yes, so really it just leads me to say a big thank you to you all. We will be sharing all of the information that you've seen today, so the competition guidance, the eligibility email, recordings of today's event, and links to the networking platform, the marketplace, the clinics, the application event, the tech showcase. There's so much information, so we'll make sure you get all of that. But I'll just hand over now to Olivia just to have the final comments before we finish the event.
Thanks very much, Jenny, and thanks to you and the team for all the work you've done to set up today's event. Thanks also to my team and the presenters for giving such a good overview of the fund and their experiences of succeeding with their applications. I hope everyone watching found that really useful. But finally, thanks to all of you who have registered an interest in the fund so far and for kind of watching this event today. We've seen some really great projects come through the fund so far, and we're keen to make sure we get more in this next window. So if you think it offers anything for you and your business, please don't delay, please do get in touch. I know you might have lots more questions, so make sure that you're using all of those great products that we have to help you, as Jenny mentioned, and please do that as soon as possible. So yeah, thanks for your time today. And we hopefully look forward to receiving your applications and discussing them with you very much in advance of that 29th of April deadline. Thanks all.
Thank you.